One of the consequences of the First Crusade is a series of assaults on Jewish communities in the Rhineland area of what's now Germany. So it's worth thinking a little bit here about how Jews arrive in medieval Europe and then to think through this specific set of incidents. I have a map up for you to look at that shows patterns of migration of Jews to various parts of Europe over a 1,000-year period or so. Around 500 CE, we have isolated groups of Jews and individuals living in various European cities. They're mostly traders and merchants. Now, it's important to remember that Jews have been inhabitants of Rome since sometime in the 2nd century BCE and other areas along the Mediterranean coast. But there's a gradual moving up around the year 500 into more northern areas of Europe. These Jews are not part of the broader Jewish intellectual life that we will find developing in the Islamic world, especially in areas like Babylon. If we move forward about 500 years, around 1000 CE, we find really firmly established Jewish communities in Northern Europe. This realm of Judaism is referred to as Ashkenaz or Ashkenazi Judaism. This is the word for Western, essentially, in Hebrew. Most of the Jews that we encounter in the United States who come through European, Eastern European, Western European patterns of migration are from this Ashkenazi community. There are also a significant population of Jews in the Iberian Peninsula in southern Italy, and they are referred to as the region of Sepharad, or Sephardic Jews. This is the Hebrew word for the region of Spain. These two populations are vibrant, and so by the year 1050 or so, we have a really blossoming Jewish intellectual life in Northern European cities. However, it's also important to note that typically, these communities are never more than about 1% of the population of any given city. They're very much ethnic and religious minorities in whatever context they're found in Northern Europe. The situation is slightly different in Spain, where there's a more fulsome presence and actually greater degrees of toleration under the Islamic Caliphate there. It's important to know about what the policy towards the Jewish people were through the Church of Rome. Pope Gregory the Great, he is Pope between 590 and 604, rules that the forcible baptism of Jews is not permitted. He has to rule this in a letter because there are priests in his territories who are doing this very thing. He says the problem here is that if someone doesn't willingly convert, they'll simply slip back to their previous religion and actually do greater harm to themselves and others. And so rather, there should be a focus on conversion of Jews voluntarily through preaching to them and by living a godly Christian life. Pope Gregory extends the protection to Jewish communities that they had already enjoyed under previous Roman law, the law of the Roman Empire prior to becoming Christian. And so he ensures that Jewish people and property are able to remain as they are. However, Gregory does not give Jewish communities any new rights or privileges. That is, that they remain second-class citizens, and that the building, especially of new synagogues, is not permitted to them. This set of rulings that Gregory offers is adopted by bishops throughout Christian Europe, and bishops in local communities where Jews exist understand themselves to be the legal protectors of those Jewish communities. And so frequently you have the Jewish community being placed right next to the bishop's residence, which is also often right by the cathedral of the city. So they're really right in this heart of the urban center. As I noted, There are attacks on Jewish communities in the Rhineland in the spring of 1096 after the calling of the First Crusade in 1095. Now, if you look on a map, you'll notice that the Rhineland, the Rhine River and its territories, are nowhere near a route to Jerusalem. And so those who attack these communities are not part of the official crusading bands, armies, but rather local groups who've been stirred up by the call to crusade and turn their attention onto local Jewish communities. I want to read from the narrative of the Old Persecution, or the Mainz Anonymous, to help set the scene here. Now, the Mainz Anonymous is one of 3 chronicles of these assaults on Jewish communities written in Hebrew by Jewish survivors. And so these texts were really not known by Christians. Christians had their own Latin accounts of these events, though. So it reads, in the year 1028, they're doing a particular kind of reckoning of time that doesn't quite match the dates we have. After the destruction of the temple, that's how they're dating things, this evil befell Israel. Now, it's really significant that they're dating these events to a period after the fall of the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. One of the sub-themes of this text is how the assault on the city of Mainz is symbolically like another assault on the holy city of Jerusalem itself that the Romans had executed 1,000 years before. It goes on. The noblemen and counts and the common people in the land of France united and decided to soar up like an eagle, to wage war and to clear a way to Jerusalem, the holy city. So they're talking about how they know that the attack that happens to them is a link to this call for the First Crusade. And to come to the tomb of the crucified one, a rotting corpse that cannot avail and cannot save, being of no worth or significance. One of the things of Jewish texts from this time period is they'll never mention the name of Jesus himself, but rather they will use these derogatory terms to refer to him. And this is because of the hostility they perceive from the worshipers of Jesus. They said to each other, so this is quoting who they understand their assailants to be, "Look now, we're going to a distant country to make war against mighty kings and are endangering our lives to conquer the kingdoms which do not believe in the crucified one. When actually it's the Jews who murdered and crucified him." So this whole narrative of hostility towards Jews and blaming Jews alone for the death of Jesus, which is something that we have seen in previous Christian literature, now has deadly consequences. So it goes on. They stirred up hatred against us in all quarters and declared that either we should accept their abominable faith or else they would annihilate us all, even infants and sucklings. The noblemen and common people placed an evil symbol, a vertical line over a horizontal one, on their garments and special hats on their heads. So they won't even describe the cross, which they also see as a sign of hostility towards them. But they make it clear that they are experiencing the threat of conversion or death. The logic here that the text is showing is that the assault against these local Jewish communities happens because Christians have identified Jews as the enemies who live within Christendom, just as much as Muslims are the enemies who live outside of Christendom. And so if they're on their way to take care of the Muslims, they might as well stop first and take care of Christians. Take care of the Jewish people. Note then this logic of purity and of purification that's operating in the Gregorian Reform movement has now become deadly in 2 ways, towards Jews and towards Muslims. So this shows that rhetoric actually has consequences. If you talk about Jews killing Jesus, you might end up killing Jews yourself. If you talk about the need to purify the land or to purify the church, you might begin to identify enemies and to persecute them. Language has consequences. There is a range of responses that the Jewish people have. Initially, what they do is they turn to the bishop for help because the bishop has said they're going to protect them. That's been the deal. and the bishop is unable to. Then they seek to negotiate with their assailants. That doesn't work. Then they seek their neighbors' help, their Christian neighbors. They're afraid of being attacked, so that doesn't work. Then they try to bribe their assailants. That doesn't work. Finally, they do what any threatened community will do, is they resist their attackers with force. These Jews are not passive victims. When that fails, they refuse baptism. And they're either killed by their attackers, or they kill each other rather than die by Christian hands. Now, it had been traditional in Judaism to teach that if you're faced with baptism or conversion, that one ought to, faced with conversion or death, one ought to choose conversion and then revert back to Jewish life later on, once the persecution threat has happened. That was a teaching that was developed in an Islamic context when persecution was episodic and rare. This, though, and also that Islam was not seen as so definitively in opposition to Judaism as Christianity was. However, Western Christianity, by this point, has developed such a theological hostility towards Jews and has described them as basically the synagogues of Satan and their followers as murderers of Jesus and collaborators with the devil, that the internal Jewish conversation is, we have to never convert to Christianity. And in this context, Judaism understands that conversion to Christianity leads one to go to hell for Jews. Furthermore, they understood that dying at the hand of a Christian meant that one died in a ritually impure state. And so, the logic is that they will kill each other rather than die at Christian hands. And they will kill their children rather than have their children be baptized and raised as Christians, because those children will end up in hell if they're Christian. And so they take a very extreme perspective here. I have to note that this is anomalous in Jewish history. This thinking and logic only ever occurs at this moment in time in the year 1096. But we have to see the external Christian pressures that led to this happening. Clearly, some people did temporarily convert because there are survivors who write about this account. And this memory is preserved in Jewish culture and is still remembered to this day, especially in Yom Kippur and the synagogue liturgy, where the martyrs of 1096 are remembered. It's also important to see that the martyrs see themselves as recreating a temple, both as priest and victim. This is on page 103 of this same reading. In the middle, it says, on the 23rd of Iyar, the errant ones, that's the Christians, the Crusaders, so-called, and the burghers said, let's take vengeance against those who have remained in the courtyard and chambers of the bishop. So there's a group hiding under the protection of the bishop. People assembled from all the surrounding villages, together with the errant ones and the burghers, that's the citizens of the city, and they besieged and fought against them. A great battle was fought between the two groups until they captured the chambers where the children of the sacred covenant were sheltered. When they saw that the just war was on every side by decree of the King of Kings, that's God, they justified heaven's judgment upon them, placed their trust in their Creator, and offered true sacrifices, taking their children and wholeheartedly slaughtering them in witness the oneness of the venerated and awesome name. The notables of the community were slain there. Note that language of sacrifice. They are creating or recreating the temple as both priest and victim. And their martyrdom is happening as fidelity to God and to their covenant with God. And so they're imagining the Jewish community of Mainz as a truly holy community whose destruction is only equivalent to the destruction of Jerusalem in the year 70. And so there's a counter narrative here. This text is written about a generation later. So after Christians have returned from the First Crusade, have celebrated their glorious triumph in Jerusalem and saying, we have finally purified Jerusalem. This Jewish text and the Jewish communities in the Rhineland are saying, no, we purified Jerusalem. We recreated Jerusalem. The temple descended here in Mainz, and we were the holy ones who restored the glory of Jerusalem through the death of our martyrs. And so it's a counter-narrative to the Christian triumphalism of the First Crusade also. So this introduces you to that there's competing narratives now at work about who is the truly righteous community, the community of the Christians or the community of the Jews. I don't want to leave you the sense that it's all about full-on hostility between Jews and Christians in the Middle Ages. There are significant elements of collaboration. It's not wholesale persecution, wholesale murder all the time. In particular, we have examples of Christian scholars, especially in the region of Paris in England, consulting with local rabbis as they seek to understand the original Hebrew of the Old Testament. And they come to actually learn rabbinic modes of exegesis as well. There's actually a really tremendous body of literature on this developing. We also have evidence that Christian theologians like Thomas Aquinas use the writings of Jewish thinkers like Moses Maimonides. If you read Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica, he will speak in a number of places about the teacher Moses or our rabbi, and here he's referring to Maimonides' works. We also have examples of Jewish art informed by Christian artistic endeavors. We have evidence of Christian artists working in Jewish manuscript production shops, Jewish artists working in Christian manuscript production shops. And with the details of illuminated manuscripts, we have the evidence of artistic cross-fertilization. So it's not all a history of suffering and death. There are moments of collaboration and of coming together. And those are signs of hope that we can hold on to as we Christians today try to live in greater harmony and a true spirit of being one with our Jewish and Muslim siblings. That's a lot. I hope we can process some of this when we talk.